This is slightly awkward because a lot of what I'm talking about is what Sally was just referring to as adopting a contradictory pose. So that's cast an entirely new light on my presentation, which I didn't foresee at all. I'm going to start by just talking about what I mean by content discovery. It's a very simple concept. It's helping content to find its audience. It's a complex thing. It's a simple concept, but it's quite a complex process to deal with. At the same time, it's very simple. It depends on your audience. And your audience for metadata is going to be very different to the audience for full text. Now, from our perspective, metadata is the advertisement. You want to get that in front of as many people as possible. That's your calling card. It's worth bearing in mind that while publishers largely have direct metadata feeds to a lot of places, you also get indirect metadata feeds, so I'm conscious that a lot of our stuff is discovered via data feeds from PubMed and Crossref, for instance, so we've got to be quite careful about managing that and understanding how that impacts downstream. As Sally alluded to earlier on, reaching the audience for full text is slightly more complicated because there's usually some kind of gateway or access control in place, which has its own pitfalls and benefits. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what's happened at Emerald over the last year or so. It was about September last year. Letty Conrad came on board as a consultant to help Emerald get their content discovery program kick-started. She did quite a lot of work assessing the situation at Emerald and identified some quick wins in terms of metadata feeds. She also set up a discovery task force, which is a cross-business team, which has got people from across the whole of Emerald, marketing, content production, etc. It helps us make sure that the activities that we're doing are focused on business needs and they're coordinated across the business as well. I took over from Letty back in February when I joined Emerald. One of the first things I looked at was whether I should be focusing on or off-site discovery. So this is understanding whether people are searching for content on our platform or whether they're searching elsewhere and then coming to us for the content. There are a number of tools which I use to understand the landscape around that. So we've got path analysis, that's understanding how customers are using our platform. We've got referrer analysis, which is understanding how people get to our platform. There's understanding full text usage. And the final source of data, which I'm just starting to explore, is the Google Search Console. So that's giving us an indication of which sites are linking to our platform, but not necessarily generating traffic, and that's something that's of interest. I started off with the path analysis, and it became pretty clear that the abstract page is our home page. Coupled with the fact that 85% of visits don't even touch our on-site search, that made it pretty clear that my first focus should be on off-site discovery, so understanding how we work with external parties. So I started looking at the reporting that we've got available to understand how that's working. I expect a lot of you have seen something like this. Very high-level graph of referrals that we get from different domains. I'd spent some time breaking this down and understanding how you could get more granular data, and we've ended up with some reports like this. So this is an example report for referrals from library discovery services, so Summon, EBSCO Discovery Service. It's worth noting that there's the light blue band across the middle is through link resolvers. So we know they're coming from academic sites, but we don't know the underlying discovery service because the link resolver is obscuring where that traffic is actually coming from. But we can break that down as well, so I know which link resolvers are widely used by our customers, and if things start to go wrong, I know who to go and talk to. So with the analytics in place, we can start looking at the question of where our users coming from. Google and Google Scholar, largely. A chunk of our traffic we just don't know. I'll come to that in a moment. It's a bit more nuanced than this, though, because the quality of the traffic varies according to the source. So in terms of Google and Google Scholar, they actually have much lower success rates in terms of getting access to full text than traffic coming from discovery services and through link resolvers. That's not a big surprise, particularly because sites using discovery services and link resolvers are likely to have a subscription in the first place. I'm actually surprised that the discrepancy between the two isn't bigger. Now that we've got this reporting in place, one of the things that it does is flag up trends and changes week on week. And that's where I noticed this spike in referrals from BBC, which was somewhat unexpected. I spoke to the guys in our PR department. They weren't working actively with BBC to promote anything. So I did a bit of digging, and it turns out that we were cited in an article about the Soviet-German warfare program in the 70s. We had a similar spike a couple of weeks later from The Independent, and that was a story about how to tell if your boss is a psychopath. So we've got some interesting content. I prefer the story about whether it's better to take your dog to work or not, but that's a more even traffic for that one. There are shortcomings in the data, though. As I pointed out earlier on, some of the traffic from link resolvers is masking the underlying source, and I also believe that we're losing some information about traffic because it's coming from encrypted sites. So our platform has encryption enabled where it's important, but it's not site-wide. And I think that means that we're losing some information about where people are coming from, and I'll explain why. This is a graph of incoming traffic from one of our larger customers. And when I saw that drop in the dark blue back in June, I had palpitations. I was really worried that that was indicative of a problem. So I had a look at the full text usage, and that showed a similar pattern. But it turns out that it only shows that pattern when you're looking at traffic from known sources. If you add in traffic where we don't know the origin of the download, actually the usage is looking quite healthy. And on further investigation, it turns out that in June, the library system switched to an HTTPS encrypted website, and because we don't have the encryption, we're losing that referrer traffic. Now, this is a pattern that we're seeing more widely across referrals to our website. There's been a switch back in June or so where we're seeing less information about the sources of incoming traffic, and I believe that that's down to HTTPS. So one of the I guess one of the most important questions for content discovery is, where is it going wrong? Where is the user journey falling down? The data that I've been looking at gives us some indication of sources of problems. So this is a graph of browser page height versus bounce rate, and there's a negative correlation showing for this. The smaller the user's browser window, the more likely they are to look at one page and then just disappear again. Now, this dashed blue line is Google's recommendation for where content should appear on your page at 900 pixels. I think we should actually aim for 766 because that's where most of our content usage comes from. So that's something that we're looking at. Another place where things can go wrong is if library discovery services don't index your content very well or very quickly. So I've put in place some auditing to understand how well that's working for us. It gives us output like this. So this is understanding how well different discovery services are covering content between 1 and 6 months after publication. So it's a little bit unfair to include 1 month after publication because that's including ahead of print, so content that's not been included in an issue yet. So some services won't index that until it's actually had a formal, been assigned formally to a particular publication. But this lets us see where we need to work with discovery service providers to work on their coverage of our content. And we also publish different kinds of content. Coverage of book chapters, journal articles is all right. Case studies is a bit more hit and miss. So again, this is a point of action that we can take. Another way of understanding where things are going wrong is to actually go out to customers and have a look and see where things are going wrong for them. Much to my surprise, one site visit found single sign-on was not working. The customer journey was nowhere near as smooth as expected. One site, they party like it was 1995 and there's absolutely no CSS. There was a subtle platform sign-in bug, which I only found because I went to see some customers and found some metadata issues which were resulting in deep linking not working. I don't know where that metadata problem's come from. It's under investigation. So what next for Emerald? Well, there's a few things that we're looking at doing. Changing the article page layout to bring the meat of the content above that 900 pixel layer, and hopefully that will see our bounce rate drop. Enabling HTTPS across the site, so that's got benefits beyond understanding where traffic is coming from. I'm worried about how much we are dependent on Google, a tweak to that algorithm, and we're going to see problems. So I'm looking to diversify traffic sources, and we've got a couple of pilots running, and there's a couple of other people that I'm planning to talk to. And I'm looking for closer collaboration with library discovery service vendors so that we can sort out some of the problems with indexing. Further down the line, I want to get a better understanding of our bounce rates and how that relates to turnaways and how that relates to authentication and the whole user journey from doing a search to actually getting to the full text. Really a bit of focus on on-site discovery. Only 15% of people are actually using it. I'd quite like to understand why that is and what we can do to increase that rate and get people to stay on our site. As I mentioned before, Crossref is an important source of metadata for third parties, so I want to make sure that what we're sending to Crossref is complete, accurate, and of good quality. And the final thing that I'm planning to do is have a look at the Crossref Event Data API. I think there's some really useful insight that we can get from that, and I'm quite looking forward to having a play around with that. So, exciting times ahead. Thank you very much.